The fire wasn't fate. It wasn't tragedy. It was murder. Scripted by Yolanda, the woman arrogant enough to call herself my husband's upgrade. And Douglas, the man who once vowed to love and protect me, stood at her side watching me burn. Imagine opening your eyes in a hospital bed, skin scorched, lungs heavy, and the first voice you hear is your own husband whispering that another woman will replace you. Not because she loves him, not because she's worthy, but because she believes my silence meant weakness and my life meant nothing. But here's what Douglas and Yolanda never knew. Silence isn't surrender. While they plotted my death, I was quietly building a 500 million empire they could never touch. This isn't just betrayal. It's proof that greed makes people blind, arrogance makes them reckless, and sometimes the woman you try to bury rises with fire in her hands. Before we get into this, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. And if this moment, when a woman woke up after a fire accident, only to realize her husband's mistress had plotted to erase her, not knowing she was sitting on a secret 500 million investment, stopped you in your tracks, then hit that subscribe button and smash like right now. Because you're about to see how it all began. The whispers, the lies, the fire, the betrayal, and the shocking twist that nobody saw coming. Now let's rewind to how this incredible story started. The first thing I smelled when I woke up was smoke. Not the kind that warms a house on winter nights or the kind that floats from ribs grilling on a summer Sunday. This smoke was sharp, metallic, bitter, in a way that clawed its way down my throat and stayed there. I coughed, or at least I tried to. My chest refused to obey, and instead I heard the brittle beep of a machine scolding me for trying too hard. The sound was steady, insistent, a metronome marking time I didn't feel I had. My eyes cracked open slowly, white walls, pale curtains, the steady hum of fluorescent lights overhead. A hospital. I wasn't dead, but I knew, deep in my bones, that I had been close. My lips were dry, the taste of ash still there, but before I could gather my thoughts, a voice filled the silence. "Rest, Viola." Douglas, my husband. His voice was familiar, the same voice that once tucked me into dreams with gentle words, the same voice that soothed me through our early years when money was tight and hope was thinner. But this time, there was no comfort in it. It was low, smooth, but jagged underneath, like he was enjoying something I didn't yet understand. I turned my head. My body screamed at me, heavy and unwilling, but I forced it anyway. And there he was, standing at the foot of my bed, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his tie loosened like the day had worn him down. "You've done enough," he said. I frowned. Done enough? What did that even mean? The machine's rhythm filled the gap, steady but somehow mocking. Then Douglas leaned closer. His lips curved into something resembling a smile, but it wasn't soft, not tender. It was cruel. "Yolanda and we have plans now, real plans." The name hit me like another accident, one worse than the one that had landed me here. If you believe betrayal should never be rewarded, hit subscribe right now, because only cheaters and liars would scroll past without subscribing. Yolanda, I had heard whispers before, rumors tucked into conversations at church, raised eyebrows from women who wanted to tell me but didn't. Late nights at the office. Phone calls he cut short when I entered the room. I had let those moments slip by, trusting him, choosing not to be the bitter wife who suspects shadows. But here, in this sterile room, with machines keeping me alive, he dared to say her name, not with shame, not even with hesitation, with pride. I let silence linger between us, the kind of silence that grows heavy, sharp. I wanted him to feel it. Finally, I whispered, my voice scratchy but steady. "Yolanda?" He raised a brow, smug. "Yes, Yolanda. She's wealthier than you now, Viola." "Can you imagine that? My mistress richer than my wife." He said it like poetry. as if betrayal was something to perform, a monologue he had rehearsed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip these tubes out and remind him who I was, who we had been. But anger was a fire that would only burn me now. My father's voice echoed in my head. "Don't waste your strength in rage, girl. Save it for the fight that matters." So I turned my gaze toward the window. Sunlight stretched across the curtains, faint but determined, and for a moment I imagined it was reaching for me. "Douglas," I said quietly, "call the nurse. Ask her to bring me my bag." He frowned. "For what?" "For the envelope inside." And for the first time since he opened his mouth, I saw something flicker in his eyes, a crack in arrogance, a hint of fear. I should tell you something. People like Douglas, they always mistake silence for weakness. They think because you don't shout, because you don't fight with fists, that you are defenseless. But I learned long ago that silence is just another weapon. I was raised in a 2-bedroom house with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet that sang at night. My father, Isaiah, was a mechanic who smelled of oil and iron, and my mother, Ruth, was a nurse who came home with tired feet, but eyes full of light. From them, I learned 2 things. From Mama. Kindness is power, Viola. Don't ever let this world tell you otherwise. And from Daddy, money doesn't change who you are. It just shows the world what you've been hiding. I built my life on those lessons. While Douglas was busy buying suits and chasing status, I was quietly studying numbers. Stocks, medical tech, renewable energy before it was popular. Brick by brick, dollar by dollar, I built something. Not for pride, not to show off, but to survive. $500 million worth of survival, hidden behind silence. And now, as I lay in that hospital bed, listening to my husband gloat about another woman, I knew exactly what needed to happen next. Douglas didn't know about the envelope. He didn't know about Malcolm, the lawyer I trusted more than him. He didn't know that Yolanda's wealth was just a fraction of mine. But he would. He paced at the end of the bed now, his polished shoes tapping against the linoleum floor. He thought he was winning. That arrogance practically radiated off him. "Viola, don't look at me like that," he muttered. "You've always been too serious, too quiet. Yolanda makes me feel alive. She laughs at my jokes. She makes me feel seen." I wanted to laugh then. Seen? A man with a wife of 20 years at his side, and he still claimed invisibility. That wasn't love he was chasing. That was ego. My voice was a whisper, but it carried weight. "And how does it feel, Douglas, to need another woman to feel like a man?" His jaw tightened. The smugness cracked again, just a little. The door opened then, and a nurse peeked in, smiling gently at me. "Mrs. Green," she said softly, "you're awake. Thank God." "Yes," I rasped. "Please, my bag. It's in the cabinet." Douglas shifted. "That's not necessary." "It is," I interrupted, sharper than before. The nurse gave a small nod and retrieved the bag, setting it gently on the table beside me. My hands trembled as I reached, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. Douglas leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What's in there, Viola?" And I smiled. For the first time since waking up, I smiled. "You'll see." Outside that hospital room, life went on. Nurses hurried down hallways with clipboards and IV bags. Families whispered prayers in waiting rooms. The world didn't stop because Viola Green's husband had just confessed his betrayal. But inside that room, time stretched thin. Every movement, every silence, every breath was a battle. Viola's body was weak, but her spirit was sharpening like glass under pressure. And Douglas, who believed he had won, had no idea the game was only beginning. Douglas's eyes darted to the bag as if it were alive. His hand twitched like he wanted to snatch it, but he held himself back. Arrogance kept him still. He thought nothing I had could matter. I slid the envelope from the bag with fingers that trembled less from weakness than from anticipation. The paper felt warm in my hands, as though it carried the heat of every sacrifice I had made to fill it. "You're awfully dramatic," Douglas muttered, arms crossed. His voice was steady, but the muscle in his jaw gave him away. I didn't answer right away. Silence is a language all its own. Instead, I traced the edge of the envelope with my thumb, letting him squirm in it. When I finally spoke, my voice was soft, almost kind. "Do you know what this is?" He scoffed. "A will? A love letter? Viola, you're lying in a hospital bed. No piece of paper is going to change the fact that I'm moving on." I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I once trusted with every piece of me now stood there like a stranger. And yet, beneath the smugness, I caught it again. Fear. "It's a record," I said, "of everything you never thought to ask me about, of who I really am when you're not looking." He blinked, but before he could ask more, the door opened again. Malcolm stepped in. Malcolm Johnson had been my lawyer for years, though lawyer was too small a word for him. He was counsel, confidant, and in moments like this, the wall that stood between me and ruin. He carried himself with a quiet authority, not the kind that shouted, but the kind that filled a room without effort. "Mrs. Green," he greeted me with a nod, then glanced at Douglas. His expression didn't change, but something in the air did. "Malcolm," I whispered, relief loosening my chest. "You came." "Of course," he said, his voice rich and steady. "I heard about the accident. I had to make sure you were safe." His eyes flicked to Douglas again, lingering this time. "Are you?" Douglas bristled. "Who invited you?" "I did," I answered before Douglas could get too loud. My voice was thin but sharp enough to cut through him. "Malcolm has always been a part of my plans, even the ones you never knew existed." Douglas turned on me. "Plans? What plans?" Malcolm walked closer, his leather briefcase clicking open with a deliberate slowness. He pulled out a folder and placed it on the table next to my bed, right beside the envelope. "Mr. Green," Malcolm said smoothly, "I'd advise you to choose your words carefully. You may think you understand your wife's position, but I assure you, you don't." Douglas laughed, the sound short and bitter. "My wife? My wife has been living under my roof, wearing the clothes I bought her, eating the meals I paid for. She wouldn't survive a week without me." I let the words settle. Once, they would have gutted me. Years ago, I might have believed them, but not anymore. "Is that what you think, Douglas?" I asked softly. "That I wouldn't survive without you?" He leaned down, his face inches from mine. "I don't just think it, Viola. I know it." Malcolm cleared his throat. "Then you're in for quite an education." For a moment, I let my eyes close, let my mind drift back to where it all began. I saw myself at 23, working in the back office of a small medical supplies company. Numbers on spreadsheets had been my comfort, quiet and precise. While others chased gossip by the vending machine, I chased trends in the stock market, scribbling notes in the margins of old receipts. I remembered saving every bonus, skipping dinners out, investing in places no one else thought to look. I remembered the laughter of colleagues who thought me dull, the gentle encouragement of my father reminding me that patience could build empires. One small win led to another, and then another, until one day I wasn't just balancing spreadsheets anymore. I was holding stock certificates worth more than my yearly salary, and I never told Douglas, because even then I knew. I knew he wasn't the kind of man who could be trusted with power he hadn't earned. When I opened my eyes, Douglas was still glowering, and Malcolm was calmly arranging papers. "This," Malcolm said, tapping the folder, "is documentation of your wife's holdings, investments, trusts, portfolios, conservatively estimated at..." He paused, meeting Douglas's eyes. $500 million. The room went silent. Even the machine seemed to hush for a moment. Douglas blinked, then laughed again, louder this time, as if sound could drown out truth. $500 million? Don't insult me. Viola doesn't even know how to balance a checkbook. Malcolm arched a brow. Doesn't she? I slid the envelope across the bed toward Douglas. His hand hesitated, then snatched it. He tore it open, eyes scanning the papers inside. the smugness drained from his face line by line, replaced by disbelief. This is fake. It's not, I said calmly. You hid this from me? I nodded. Of course. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, Douglas, but because I knew what you would do if you ever found out. He staggered back a step, clutching the papers like they might bite him. All this time, you had this? And you let us struggle? I almost laughed. Struggle? You mean the years you wasted on cars we didn't need, dinners you couldn't afford, trips that emptied our savings? That wasn't struggle, Douglas. That was pride. And I wasn't going to feed it with my future. Malcolm folded his hands. Your wife's investments were designed to be untouchable. Even if you'd known, you wouldn't have been able to touch a cent. Douglas's face turned red. She's my wife. That money belongs to both of us. No, I whispered. It belongs to me. Every dollar earned in silence, every risk I took while you weren't paying attention. He froze, staring at me as though he was finally seeing me for the first time, and he didn't like what he saw. The door creaked open again. Yolanda stepped inside. I had never seen her up close before, but I recognized her instantly. She was everything Douglas had described. Bold, dazzling, wrapped in confidence like a second skin. Her dress was red, lips to match, and she carried herself as though the world belonged to her already. Well, she purred, her eyes sweeping over me, the machines, the papers in Douglas's hand. Isn't this cozy? Douglas stiffened. Yolanda, what are you doing here? She smiled, checking on my investment. Her gaze flicked to me. You don't mind, do you, Viola? My throat burned, but I held her stare. You plotted a fire, and now you walk into this room like you belong here. Her smile widened. Oh, honey, belonging is just a matter of perception. People see what you let them see, and right now they see a wife lying in bed and a woman like me standing on her own 2 feet. Malcolm stepped forward, his presence a barrier. Ms. Price, this is neither the time nor the place. Yolanda waved a manicured hand dismissively. Don't scold me, counselor. I'm not here to fight. Not yet. She looked at Douglas then, her expression sharp. So? Did she tell you? Douglas's mouth opened and closed. He looked at me, then at the papers, then back at Yolanda. She's worth $500 million, he whispered. Yolanda's eyes gleamed. And in that moment, I understood something. This wasn't just about love. It wasn't even about lust. This was about hunger, and Yolanda was starving. I lay back against the pillows, my body weak, but my mind clear. They thought I was trapped here, a patient with nothing but machines to keep her alive, but they were wrong. Because while Douglas and Yolanda whispered about money and plans, and while Malcolm stood steady at my side, I knew something neither of them understood. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. The room had become too small. The 4 of us inside, me, Douglas, Yolanda, Malcolm, felt like magnets pressing against each other, sparks flaring in silence. Yolanda leaned against the wall as though she owned it, her perfume, sharp and sweet, cutting through the antiseptic air. Douglas held the papers with trembling hands, his knuckles white, his confidence draining by the second. Malcolm stood tall at my side, unmoved, his quiet authority filling the space. And me? I lay in that bed, body weak, but spirit sharpened like glass under flame. You kept this from him, Yolanda said, her voice dripping with amusement. $500 million tucked away in stocks and trusts, and you never thought to share? Her eyes met mine. For a moment, I wondered if she was impressed. But no, hunger gleamed there, pure and unapologetic. It wasn't his to share in, I said softly. My throat ached, but I forced the words out steady. He never asked. He never listened. Why would I hand him a fortune he couldn't respect? Douglas slammed the papers down on the bedside table. Do you hear yourself, Viola? I am your husband. Everything you have is mine, everything. Smash the like button if you can't stand greedy manipulators. Only the selfish and shameless won't like this video. Malcolm spoke then, calm but firm. Legally, that's not true. These assets were secured long before your involvement, Mr. Green. Your wife's foresight protected them from opportunists. Douglas glared at him, then at me. Opportunists? Is that what you think I am? I met his gaze. No, Douglas. That's what you proved you are. He recoiled like the words had struck him. Yolanda chuckled low in her throat, stepping closer to him. Baby, don't let her rattle you. She's clinging to scraps. Paper and ink don't make her stronger than us. Us. The word slid into the room like poison. Douglas's shoulders straightened at it. Yolanda's voice had a way of wrapping around him, tugging at the threads of his pride until he believed her. You see, Viola, Yolanda continued, turning her sharp gaze back on me. The difference between you and me is simple. You hid your power. I flaunt mine. You buried yourself in numbers. I learned how to make people bend. And trust me. She leaned forward, her lips curling. People bend easier than numbers. Her words sat heavy in the air. And for the first time, I understood exactly who Yolanda was. She wasn't just bold. She wasn't just reckless. She was deliberate. The kind of woman who believed manipulation was an art form. The kind of woman who decided she could gain power by preying on the weak, the lonely, the forgotten. I thought of elders I'd seen at church, handing over their pensions to slick-talking preachers. I thought of women in my neighborhood who gave everything to men who gave nothing back. I thought of the smoke in my dreams, not by accident, but by intention. Yolanda wasn't just a mistress. She was a predator. Douglas finally found his voice again. This changes everything. Yes, it does, I said. No, he snapped, pointing at the papers. This changes everything for us, me and Yolanda. We thought she was the one with the upper hand, but it's you. $500 million, Viola? With that kind of money, we don't have to sneak anymore. We can take it and build a life without you. My stomach twisted, not at the betrayal. I had already tasted that. But at the ease with which he said it. As if I were nothing but an obstacle to be removed. Malcolm's voice cut in, steady as stone. You won't touch a cent. And if you think otherwise, Mr. Green, you'll find yourself in court faster than you can blink. Yolanda smirked. Court? Please. Men like you hide behind laws. Women like me rewrite them in real time. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I felt no fear. Tell me something, Yolanda, I whispered. When you plotted that fire, when you watched me nearly die, did you think I wouldn't notice the smoke? Douglas stiffened. What are you talking about? Yolanda's smirk didn't falter, but her eyes flashed, just for a second, enough to tell me I was right. You really think you can prove something like that? She asked smoothly. I don't have to prove it, I said. The truth always finds its way to the surface. Smoke leaves stains, flames leave scars, and lies, they burn the loudest of all. Silence fell heavy. Douglas shifted uneasily, glancing between us. Enough. Enough of this nonsense. Viola, you're delirious. Yolanda had nothing to do with your accident. But his voice lacked conviction. Malcolm closed the folder with deliberate calm. I think that's enough for today. Mrs. Green needs rest. He looked at Douglas and Yolanda, his gaze cool. You both need to leave. Yolanda straightened, fixing her red dress with a flick of her wrist. We'll leave, for now. But don't get too comfortable, Viola. Money can't protect you from everything. And Douglas, she turned to him, her hand brushing his arm possessively. We have more to talk about. They left together, the sound of her heels clicking down the hallway like a warning bell. When the door shut, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Viola, Malcolm said gently, pulling a chair closer to my bed. You need to prepare yourself. They won't stop. Not after this. I turned my face toward the window, watching the sunlight inch higher. I know, I whispered, and inside me, that flame, small, steady, grew hotter. because I had survived smoke once, and I would survive the fire again. The hallway outside my room echoed with the sharp click of Yolanda's heels. I lay there listening, eyes closed, picturing the way she held Douglas's arm, as if he were hers already. She walked like a queen, but queens need kingdoms, and kingdoms fall. When the sound finally faded, the silence in the room pressed in heavy. Malcolm placed a steady hand on the table, his calm a contrast to the storm I felt brewing. "Viola," he said, voice low but sure, "we're going to need to move carefully. This isn't just about betrayal anymore. It's about survival." I nodded faintly. My body was still weak, but my mind sharpened with every word. "She won't stop," I whispered. "Not until she has it all." "She can't have it," Malcolm said firmly. "Your investments are locked down tight, but people like Yolanda don't just chase money. They chase power, and power is harder to secure." I thought of Yolanda's words. People bend easier than numbers. She believed manipulation was stronger than math, and maybe she was right. Because Douglas, my Douglas, was already bending like grass in the wind. In the hospital parking lot, Douglas leaned against the hood of his car, running both hands through his hair. Papers still trembled in his grip, the weight of numbers he didn't understand dragging his pride down. $500 million, he muttered. "How the hell did she even—" "Focus!" Yolanda interrupted, her tone sharp. She stood close, the wind tugging at her red dress. "This isn't the time to marvel at what she did. This is the time to decide how we take it." Douglas looked at her, eyes wild. "You heard Malcolm. It's locked down. She built walls around it. I don't even know where to start." Yolanda's smile was slow, dangerous. "That's because you're thinking like a husband. Stop thinking like her partner and start thinking like her replacement." His breath caught. "Replacement?" "Yes," she purred, stepping closer. "Viola is the obstacle. You are the key. Her weakness is that she still thinks you matter. That gives us leverage." Douglas swallowed hard. She doesn't love me anymore." "Of course she does," Yolanda said smoothly. "Women like her don't stop loving. They cling to the past like it's a lifeline. That's what makes her vulnerable, and that's what we'll use." She traced a finger along his chest. "Let me handle Malcolm. Let me handle the paperwork, the threats, the whispers. You just stay close to her, keep her talking, keep her soft. And when the time comes, we'll strike." Douglas looked away, torn. He wasn't as strong as he pretended. He liked being led, and Yolanda knew it. Back in the hospital, I watched the sunlight fade across the curtains, shadows lengthening into the room. The day had been long, too long, and exhaustion pressed against my bones. But sleep didn't come easy. Behind my eyelids, I saw fire. I heard the roar of it. I felt the heat licking at my skin. I smelled the smoke, bitter, suffocating. And I saw Yolanda, standing at a distance, her smile framed by the glow of flames. My chest tightened. A knock pulled me back. The door creaked open, and a familiar voice called softly, "Baby girl?" "Mama." Ruth Green stepped inside, her frame small but her presence filling the room like a storm rolling in. Her gray hair was wrapped neatly, her Sunday best sweater buttoned tight despite the hour. She carried strength in her eyes, the kind that could cut through lies in a single glance. I tried to sit up straighter. "Mama," I whispered. She came to my side, her hands warm as they clasped mine. "Lord have mercy, Viola. Look at you. My baby, lying here because of somebody's foolishness." Her gaze shifted to Malcolm, giving him a nod of acknowledgement before landing on the envelope still resting on the table. She didn't ask what it was. Mama didn't need to ask. She had always known there was more to me than I let on. "I raised you to be quiet," she said softly, "but not to be weak. Don't you forget the difference." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. "I haven't forgotten, Mama." She squeezed my hand tighter. "Good. Because the devil is circling, and he's using familiar faces to do his work. You hear me? Don't you let him win." Malcolm cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Green, I'll be blunt. Douglas and his companion are circling Viola's fortune. They won't succeed legally. But I believe they may resort to other means." Mama's lips pressed tight. "I knew that woman was trouble the first time I heard her name." Her eyes turned back to me, sharp now. "Viola, you can't just defend yourself with papers. You got to defend yourself with wisdom, with spirit. And if you need me to, I'll sit right here by your bed until you're strong enough to do it." I let out a shaky breath, my heart swelling and aching all at once. Mama had always been like that. Firm, unyielding, ready to fight the battles I tried to ignore. For a moment I closed my eyes, letting her words wash over me. And when I opened them again, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. Meanwhile, Yolanda. At her apartment that night, Yolanda sat at her vanity, painting her lips red while Douglas paced behind her. She liked watching him unravel. It made her feel powerful. "She's stronger than I thought," he muttered. The way she looked at me, like she already knew everything. Yolanda smirked at her reflection. She's a woman scorned. They always think they're stronger than they are, but in the end, they break. They always break. Douglas stopped pacing, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "And if she doesn't?" Her smirk widened. "Then we break her ourselves." In the hospital, night settled heavy. The machines hummed their steady song. Mama sat in a chair by my bed, and Malcolm quietly made notes in the dim light. I stared at the ceiling, my voice barely a whisper in the dark. "They think they can burn me down." Mama's hand found mine again. "Baby," she said softly, "fires don't just destroy. Sometimes they purify. Sometimes they make way for new things to grow." And I held on to that, because I knew Yolanda wasn't finished, and neither was I. The night bled into morning, without mercy. Hospitals don't sleep. Machines beeped, heels clicked down corridors, and the faint smell of coffee lingered like burnt hope. I lay awake through it all, the weight of my mother's hand in mine keeping me tethered. When dawn finally broke, thin gray light pressed through the curtains. Malcolm was still in the room, glasses sliding down his nose as he scribbled notes. Mama stirred awake in the chair beside me, stretching her legs with a groan. "You didn't sleep a wink, did you?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "Sleep doesn't come easy when ghosts walk the hallways." She gave me a look. "Douglas isn't a ghost, baby. He's a fool. Fools can be dealt with." I almost smiled. Mama had a way of making things plain, cutting through the layers of betrayal with the sharpness of truth. But beneath her strength, I still felt the ache, the part of me that remembered the man Douglas used to be, the one who held me through miscarriages, who prayed with me when bills piled high. That man felt like a stranger now. And yet, he still lived inside the man who had whispered Yolanda's name in my hospital room. That was the cruelest part. Douglas sat in his car in the hospital parking lot, his tie discarded on the passenger seat. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. He had told Yolanda he'd be back later, but he couldn't bring himself to drive away just yet. The numbers haunted him. 500 million. Viola had built a fortune in silence, a fortune he had never touched, never even suspected. It wasn't just the money, it was the lie of it. "She hid it from me," he muttered. 20 years, and she hid it from me." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew the truth. He had never asked, never cared to see her beyond the role she played for him. And now? Now she was stronger than him. His pride couldn't bear it. The door opened mid-morning, and Douglas slipped back inside. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt wrinkled, as if he had wrestled with himself all night. He didn't meet my eyes at first. "Viola," he started, voice strained. I looked at him, silent. He shifted from foot to foot. I shouldn't have said what I said yesterday. About Yolanda. About plans." I tilted my head. "But you did say them." His jaw clenched. "I was angry, confused. You dropped this bomb on me, $500 million. Do you know what that feels like? Finding out your wife has been hiding that? Yes, I whispered. It feels like betrayal. The words landed, and for a moment he faltered. His mouth opened, closed. He rubbed his face with both hands, groaning. I never wanted to hurt you, he said finally. Yolanda. She was a distraction. That's all. You've been so distant, so quiet. She made me feel alive again. Alive. The same word he had used before. I closed my eyes, the sting of tears threatening. And did she make you feel alive when she planned to burn me? He froze. You really believe that? His voice cracked. I don't believe it, Douglas. I know it. I smelled her perfume in the smoke before the crash. Silence stretched between us, sharp and unbearable. Mama's voice cut through, firm as a blade. Boy, don't stand there and lie to my daughter. You knew that woman was dangerous. You chose her anyway. Douglas flinched under Mama's gaze. He had always feared her discernment. I didn't know about any fire, he insisted weakly. She wouldn't. She would, I interrupted. And she did. His shoulders slumped. I don't know what to do. Mama stood, crossing her arms. Then sit in your mess until you figure it out, but don't think you're dragging Viola down with you. Yolanda wasn't built for waiting. She thrived on motion, on action. By midday, she was pacing her apartment, red nails tapping against her phone as she dialed contact after contact. She won't hand it over willingly, she said into the receiver. But everyone has a weakness. Find me hers. She ended the call, poured herself a glass of wine, though it was barely noon, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. She thinks she's untouchable, she muttered. We'll see about that. That afternoon, Malcolm pulled Douglas into the hallway. I could hear fragments of their voices through the door. You need to understand, Malcolm said firmly. You have no claim to Viola's fortune. None. The more you press, the more trouble you'll invite. I'm not after the money, Douglas argued, though his tone wavered. I just want her back. Then prove it, Malcolm replied. Not with words, with actions. The hallway fell quiet. When Douglas re-entered, his face was pale, drawn. He sat in the chair across from me, staring at his hands. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said quietly, but I need you to know I'm not the enemy. I wanted to laugh at that. Not the enemy? He had handed me over to Yolanda with every choice he made. But part of me still searched his eyes for the man I used to know, and that part of me hurt most of all. That night, long after Douglas left again, Mama prayed softly by my bedside, her words a shield against the shadows. Malcolm packed his papers, reminding me that strength wasn't only about money. It was about resolve. But when I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, the dream returned. Smoke, fire, Yolanda's smile. I woke up with a start, heart pounding, and in that moment I understood. Resisting the truth wouldn't save us. It would only make the fire burn hotter. The day after Douglas's weak attempt at an apology, the hospital felt heavier, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. I could see it in the way the nurses glanced at me, pity in their eyes. I hated pity. It was the cousin of doubt, and doubt had no place in my chest anymore. Mama sat in the chair, knitting in silence, the rhythmic click of her needles filling the air. Malcolm moved like a shadow, in and out, bringing documents, phone calls, updates. He was steady, consistent, the only part of my world that hadn't cracked wide open. And then Douglas came back. This time he carried flowers, lilies, white and soft, their fragrance spilling into the sterile room. Viola, he said softly, placing them on the table. I thought you might like these. I stared at them. Pretty things, fragile and fleeting, like his apologies. You're trying too hard, I murmured. His smile faltered. I'm trying, Viola. Doesn't that count for something? Mama snorted without looking up. Trying doesn't undo doing, Douglas. His jaw clenched, but he swallowed the retort. He turned back to me. I can't change what happened. but I can choose differently now. I want us to rebuild." I searched his face. Was this guilt speaking, or fear of losing access to the fortune he had just discovered? I couldn't tell, and that was the problem. Across town, Yolanda sat in a dimly lit lounge, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes," she purred into the receiver. "Make sure the files leak by tomorrow. Anonymous source. Make it look messy. People love scandals." She ended the call and sipped her wine, crimson liquid catching the light like blood. Douglas was wavering. She could feel it. Viola had a way of pulling him back with guilt, with history. Yolanda couldn't afford to lose her grip now, so she'd do what she always did, turn the story. If she could humiliate Viola publicly, show her as weak, pitiful, undeserving, then Douglas would see the truth. And once the world smelled blood, it would feast. She leaned back, smiling to herself. "500 million," she whispered. "It's already mine. She just doesn't know it yet." That evening, a nurse slipped in with a tablet, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Mrs. Green, I think you should see this." I frowned, taking the screen. There it was, my face. Pale, bruised, half-conscious in the hospital bed. A video, grainy but clear enough. A caption. "Billionaire's wife clings to life after suspicious crash. Sources say, husband moves on with mistress." My hands trembled, not from fear, from fury. They had filmed me in my most vulnerable moment. They had turned my pain into spectacle. Douglas paled when he saw it. "Viola, you didn't stop it either," I snapped. Mama leaned forward, eyes blazing. "This is Yolanda's hand. Don't tell me you don't see it, boy." Malcolm exhaled sharply. "This isn't just gossip. This is targeted. She's building a narrative. One where you're the weak one, Viola, and she's the savior." I forced myself to breathe, steady and slow. "Let her," I whispered. "The louder she shouts, the easier it will be to show her for what she is." Douglas shifted uncomfortably. She said it was just us, that she wanted to build something new." Mama's laugh was bitter. "Baby, she's building all right, building herself a throne out of your wife's ashes." Meanwhile, Douglas and Yolanda. Later that night, Douglas found himself back at Yolanda's apartment, the red glow of her lamps bathing everything in danger. "She's stronger than I thought," he admitted. "The way she looks at me, it's like she's already judged me guilty." Yolanda wrapped her arms around him from behind, whispering in his ear. "That's because she has. Viola will never forgive you. You'll spend the rest of your life groveling, begging for scraps of affection she'll never give. With me, you don't have to beg. You take, we take." Her words poured into him like honey over poison. He wanted to believe her, needed to, but somewhere deep inside, Viola's quiet strength still echoed. Back in Viola's room, Malcolm sat with me long after Mama had gone home to rest. His voice was low, steady. "You know this isn't going to end with whispers and videos. Yolanda will push harder. She'll look for cracks." I nodded slowly. "She thinks my silence is a crack. She doesn't understand that silence is my strength." He studied me for a long moment, then said, "Strength doesn't mean you have to bear it alone. When the time comes, you'll need to let others fight beside you." His words sank deep. Because he was right. This wasn't just my battle anymore. It was Mama's. It was Malcolm's. It was every quiet woman who had ever been underestimated. And Yolanda didn't know it yet. But she wasn't just fighting me. She was fighting all of us. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the lilies Douglas had brought. Their petals were already wilting, curling inward. Pretty things never lasted. I reached for the trash bin and pushed them in. When Douglas returned the next morning and saw the empty table, his face fell. "Viola," he whispered. "Please." But I only looked at him, my silence sharper than any blade. Because resistance wasn't just theirs anymore. It was mine, and I would not break. The hospital was no longer a refuge. It had become a cage. By the third day after the video leaked, reporters crowded the sidewalk outside, cameras flashing like lightning every time the glass doors opened.
I could hear their voices even from my bed. "Mrs. Green, did your husband's mistress orchestrate the fire?" Viola.
"Are you suing? Is the $500 million rumor true?" The nurses did their best to shield me, but whispers always found their way in. Headlines scrolled across the television in the corner. The silent wife, the mistress in red, the betrayed billionaire. I wasn't a woman anymore. I was a story, and the story was being written without me. Mama muttered prayers every time she saw another headline. "They love to see a black woman torn down," she said bitterly, her needles clicking faster than usual. "But they don't know my child. They don't know the fire in her." Malcolm was more practical. "We'll release a statement," he said, flipping through papers. "Nothing defensive, nothing aggressive. Just truth, measured and calm." But calm was a luxury I didn't feel, not when the very people who had caused this storm still lingered around me like shadows. Douglas came again that afternoon. He hadn't shaved. Stubble shadowed his jaw. He looked less like the polished man who once strutted into boardrooms, and more like a man unraveling. "Viola," he said, hovering by the door. "Can I come in?" I gestured vaguely. "You're already here." He sat, hands twisting in his lap. "The media, they're tearing us apart." I looked at him, my silence heavy. He fumbled on. "Yolanda shouldn't have done that. I told her it was too much, but she doesn't listen. She acts before she thinks." I almost laughed. "And yet you follow her anyway." His face flushed. "She makes me feel—" "Don't!" I snapped, voice breaking sharp through the air. "Don't you dare say she makes you feel alive again. You've used that line enough." The room went quiet, except for Mama's needles and the steady hum of the machines. Finally, Mama set her knitting aside. "Douglas, baby, let me ask you something. When you look at Viola, the woman who carried your burdens, who held your hand through storms, what do you feel? Not what Yolanda makes you feel. What do you feel here?" She tapped his chest. Douglas swallowed hard, eyes darting between us. I don't know anymore." And that was the truest thing he had said in weeks. But the real test came an hour later. The door opened, and Yolanda walked in like she owned the place. No hesitation, no shame. She wore another red dress, her heels clacking against the floor like punctuation marks. "Well," she drawled, eyes sweeping over me, then Douglas, then Mama. "A family reunion." Douglas shot up. "Yolanda, what are you doing here?" She smirked. "Relax, baby. I'm just here to check on Viola. Isn't that what good friends do?" Mama stood, her gaze cold. "You're no friend." Yolanda ignored her, moving closer to my bed. Her perfume was overwhelming, sickly sweet. She leaned down, her voice low enough for only me to hear. "You can glare all you want, Viola, but the world already sees you as weak. Every headline, every camera flash, it's all mine. And soon enough, Douglas will be too. Comment, 'Loyalty matters' if you're not siding with mistresses who think they can steal someone's life. Only people who defend homewreckers will stay silent." I met her gaze steadily. "You're bold, Yolanda. I'll give you that. But boldness without wisdom? That's just noise." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Malcolm entered just then, holding a folder, and froze at the sight of her. "Ms. Price," he said coolly. "You're trespassing." She straightened. "I'm visiting." "No," Malcolm corrected. "You're intruding, and I suggest you leave before I make a call that ends with security escorting you out." Yolanda glanced at Douglas, her eyes softening in mock hurt. "Are you really going to let him talk to me like that?" Douglas hesitated, torn, his silence louder than words. Yolanda's smirk returned. "That's what I thought." She blew me a kiss, then turned on her heel, strutting out as if she had won. After she left, the room was suffocating. Douglas tried to speak. "Viola, I didn't—" "Save it," I interrupted. Mama shook her head. "That woman's poison. And you keep drinking it, Douglas." He had no answer. Later that night, after the nurses dimmed the lights and the halls grew quiet, I let myself speak in the silence. First person, my voice. I remembered the early years with Douglas, the nights we ate beans and rice, the mornings we counted pennies for bus fare. I remembered his hand in mine, how it steadied me. I remembered love, real love, before pride and greed ate away at it, and I wondered if that man still lived inside him somewhere, or if Yolanda had burned him away completely. But even if he did, it no longer mattered, because I was not the same Viola either. I was not the woman who swallowed betrayal with silence. I was the woman who built an empire in the shadows, and now the shadows would fight back. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I could still hear the echoes. Yolanda's perfume, Douglas's silence, Mama's warnings, Malcolm's steady counsel. Forced together, the cracks between us only deepened, and deep cracks eventually break wide open. The fourth morning began with headlines. Mama unfolded the newspaper at the foot of my bed, her lips pressed tight. The front page showed a picture of Douglas leaving the hospital, Yolanda clutching his arm. The headline screamed, "Businessman finds solace in mistress while wife battles for life." I stared at it for a long moment, then let out a slow breath. "They're not even hiding anymore," I whispered. Mama's jaw clenched. "They never were, baby. The only difference is now the world's watching." Malcolm arrived minutes later, his face grim. He tossed a folder onto the table. "She's filing paperwork. A claim against your assets." I raised a brow. "On what grounds?" "She's naming herself as Douglas's partner in business and life, painting you as a relic of the past. Claims you've been mentally unfit since the accident." The nerve. The audacity. "She doesn't want the truth," Malcolm said, his voice tight. "She wants the story." And stories could be dangerous when the world wanted to believe them. That afternoon, Douglas appeared again. This time, Yolanda was on his arm, bold as brass, her heels clacking across the linoleum floor like she owned it. The nurse at the door hesitated, but Douglas waved her off. "It's fine," he muttered, though his face was pale. Yolanda swept in, her smile wide. "Viola, darling, you look better today, almost strong enough to face the press." Mama rose slowly from her chair. "Girl, don't you test me." But Yolanda only laughed, turning her attention to Malcolm. "Ah, the lawyer. Tell me, Malcolm, how much longer can you hold back the tide? Papers are filing, reporters are hungry, and poor Viola can't even stand yet." I met her gaze, my voice steady. "And yet I'm still here. That must sting." Her smile thinned. Douglas shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Yolanda, maybe we should—" "No!" She cut him off, squeezing his arm tighter. "They need to hear the truth. The world deserves to know who really stands beside you, Douglas." Mama scoffed. "Beside him? You mean dragging him down?" Yolanda's eyes flashed. "Say what you want, but I'm not going anywhere." She leaned closer to my bed, her voice low. "You hear that, Viola? You can't get rid of me. Not in court, not in the press, not in Douglas's heart." I let silence answer her. Silence has a way of burning deeper than words. Finally, Malcolm stepped forward. "Ms. Price, unless you want to test the hospital's trespassing policy again, I suggest you leave." Yolanda smirked, kissed Douglas on the cheek, and strutted out, but the damage lingered like her perfume. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts twisted like threads pulled too tight. Finally, I whispered into the dark. First person again. I didn't build $500 million by being careless. I learned to read people, to see the small cracks they tried to hide. Douglas's pride, Yolanda's hunger, even Malcolm's quiet loyalty. And I realized then, this wasn't just about surviving Yolanda's schemes. It was about teaching her the one truth she never learned, that silence is not weakness. It is patience, and patience, when wielded, is power. At home, Yolanda scrolled through social media, her grin widening with every post. Team Yolanda. Viola's finished. Douglas deserves happiness. She screenshot them all, sending them to Douglas with little heart emojis. When he didn't reply, she called. "Baby, don't let her guilt pull you back. We're winning." Every headline is proof. But Douglas sat in his car outside the hospital, staring at the darkened windows. "She still looks at me like I matter," he whispered, mostly to himself. Yolanda's voice sharpened. "She looks at you like a tool, Douglas. Don't forget who actually sees you." But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her tone, because Viola's silence was louder than Yolanda's noise. Back at the hospital. The next morning, Malcolm placed another folder on my table. "I've started pulling her records. Yolanda isn't as clean as she pretends. Debt, unpaid taxes, predatory schemes. Enough to sink her if we time it right." Mama chuckled darkly. "Look at God." I smiled faintly. "Patience, Malcolm. We'll use it when it hurts most." Douglas walked in then, alone this time. He looked tired, hollow. He sat heavily in the chair, staring at his hands. "I don't know who I am anymore," he admitted quietly. I studied him, my chest aching with old love and new scars. "Then find out," I said softly, "but don't do it at my expense." His eyes lifted to mine, full of shame. "Viola, I never thought you could be stronger than me." I let the silence hold him, because strength didn't need to shout. The hospital room was thick with tension now. Every visit, every silence, every headline binding us tighter together. Yolanda wouldn't leave, Douglas wouldn't choose, Malcolm wouldn't bend, Mama wouldn't stop warning. And I would not break. But I knew something had to give, because forced proximity doesn't last forever. Eventually, something explodes. The storm outside the hospital grew louder each day. Headlines, whispers, Yolanda's shameless parading. But inside, a quieter storm brewed, the one I had carried for years. It started one night when Malcolm spread papers across my blanket, his finger tapping on old dates. "Viola, when did you begin?" I traced the numbers with my eyes, remembering. Long before Douglas even noticed. Mama leaned forward. "Tell it, baby. Let them know what silence really buys." I closed my eyes, and the memories rose. I was 23 when I bought my first stock. The neighborhood was crumbling, lights flickering out one by one, but I had fire in me. Back then, Douglas was still kind. We had nothing but love and bills, and I was tired of watching love starve under weight it couldn't carry. So I read. At night, by candlelight, when the power shut off, I studied numbers, patterns, whispers from a world that didn't know my name. I saved every penny, babysitting money, scraps from cleaning houses, the tips Douglas brought home from odd jobs. I bought that first stock not as an investor, but as a woman desperate not to drown. Nobody cheered, nobody noticed, not even Douglas, but that little slip of paper became my anchor. I opened my eyes, breath shaky. "Every dollar I invested was a prayer," I whispered, "not for wealth, for freedom, for dignity." Douglas shifted in his chair, face pale. "You never told me." Mama's voice cut sharp. "Would you have listened? Back then you thought ambition was a man's game." He winced, but said nothing. Malcolm shuffled more papers. "She built carefully, stocks, bonds, reinvestments, hidden in trusts, all legal, all hers, and she never touched a cent for luxury." Douglas frowned. "But why hide it?" My voice hardened. "Because you never asked, and because some dreams can't survive in the open. They need shadows to grow." I remembered another night. Douglas had come home drunk, Yolanda's name just a rumor back then. I had wanted to tell him, to share the joy of a windfall that tripled overnight, but when I opened my mouth, he waved me off. "Stocks? That's gambling, Viola. Leave money to men who know better." And I had swallowed my words, swallowed them like medicine, bitter but necessary. That was the night I vowed never to tell him again. Present. My voice cracked as I spoke it aloud. "You didn't believe in me, Douglas, so I learned to stop needing you to." Silence. Heavy, cutting. Mama reached over, squeezing my hand. And look what that silence grew into. Even in memory, her voice intruded. people bend easier than numbers. She thought power came from bending people. She never understood that true power came from standing unbent. Douglas speaks. He finally found words. I should have seen you. Should have seen what you were carrying. I looked at him, pain sharp in my chest. But you didn't. You saw Yolanda instead. Mama let out a bitter laugh. And look where that got you. If you were Viola, carrying an empire in silence while your husband played house with his mistress, what would you do? Reveal it all sooner? Walk away? Or would you hold your cards the way Viola did, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? Tell us in the comments, and if you won't subscribe after this. I need you to say why in the comments. Go on, defend yourself. Because if betrayal this bold doesn't earn your click, what will? Malcolm slid one last paper toward me. And this, he said, proves it wasn't just survival. It was a strategy. You invested in companies Douglas mocked. The same ones now worth billions. Douglas looked at the paper, his face pale. All this time, yes, Malcolm said firmly. All this time, Viola was the backbone. While you wandered, she built. Mama leaned closer, her eyes fierce. So tell me, Douglas, do you still think Yolanda's red dresses are worth more than this woman's silence? He said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. That night, as the hospital lights dimmed, I let myself feel the weight of the years, the sacrifices, the silences, the dreams buried until they bloomed. And I realized something. The real betrayal wasn't that Douglas chose Yolanda. It was that he never chose to see me, and that truth hurt deeper than fire, but it also made me unbreakable. I watched her one afternoon as she stood in my hospital room again, uninvited as always. She was telling some story about her humble beginnings, her voice honeyed, her laugh rehearsed. Douglas leaned against the wall, staring at the floor, but he didn't stop her. He never stopped her. And as I listened, something in me shifted. I realized Yolanda wasn't fearless. She was frantic. Every word out of her mouth was a plea. See me, want me, believe me. But desperation dressed in silk was still desperation. At 20, Yolanda worked reception at a law firm downtown. She wasn't qualified, but the senior partner liked the way she said, "Good morning," in that low, smoky voice. She watched the women in suits sweep past her, tailored, confident, untouchable. And she hated them, not because of who they were, but because of who she wasn't. She couldn't afford college, couldn't break ceilings built for women with last names that opened doors. But she could smile, she could charm, and so she did. One affair turned into another. One favor became three. Soon, Yolanda had her own apartment, her own car, her own wardrobe, all gifted. But gifts come with strings, and Yolanda was tired of being a marionette. That's when she met Douglas. Douglas was different, Yolanda said aloud, her hand brushing his sleeve. He wasn't powerful, he wasn't wealthy, but he was soft, and I knew I could shape him into what I needed. Douglas flinched. Yolanda, but she didn't stop. I took a man who was drowning in his wife's silence and gave him air. That's what I do, Viola. I find cracks. I make myself necessary. Her words were daggers, but I let them cut. Sometimes wounds reveal more than masks. I tilted my head. And what happens, Yolanda, when the cracks seal? When people stop needing you? For the briefest moment, her smile faltered. Later, when Yolanda stepped out to take a call, Douglas slumped in the chair across from me. You hurt her, he muttered. She said she shaped me. I looked at him, my voice low. Didn't she? His shoulders sagged. I thought I was in control, that I chose her. Mama snorted from her corner. Baby, the devil doesn't need your permission, just your weakness. Douglas buried his face in his hands. Malcolm slid a file across the table. I think it's time you both see this. Inside were copies of Yolanda's debts, credit cards maxed out, lawsuits quietly buried, loans from men whose names made my skin crawl. She isn't building anything, Malcolm said flatly. "She's running. And Douglas, she's using you as her escape route." Douglas's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Malcolm cut in. "She never wanted you to, but ignorance doesn't save you from consequence." When she walked back in, her phone still in hand, Douglas's eyes met hers differently, not with desire, not even with shame, but with dawning realization. "Yolanda," he said quietly, "how much of us was real?" She laughed, too loud. "All of it, baby. Everything. Don't listen to their poison." But her voice cracked at the edges. I sat back, watching her unravel, piece by piece. This was the woman who thought she could burn me, yet here she was, burning herself. I almost pitied her then, almost, because I knew what it was to hunger. I knew what it was to ache for more. But where I built in silence, she clawed in noise. Where I planted seeds, she scavenged scraps, and the difference was everything. That night, after Yolanda stormed out, Douglas lingered. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence told me everything. The first cracks in his loyalty to her had formed. Mama laid her hand over mine. The higher they climb on lies, the harder they fall. And for the first time, I believed Yolanda's fall had already begun. The hospital had begun to feel less like a prison and more like a sanctuary. Strange how a place meant for broken bodies could mend broken spirits. For days, chaos had swirled around me. Yolanda's intrusions, Douglas's unraveling, the press clawing at my story. But tonight was different. The halls were quiet, the air soft. It felt like a pause between storms. Mama sat by the window, her knitting needles still. She was humming an old gospel tune, the kind that spoke of rivers and deliverance. Malcolm sat across from me, papers in his lap but untouched. His glasses were perched on his head instead of his nose, his jacket folded neatly over the chair. For once, he looked less like a lawyer and more like a man at rest. "You've carried so much," he said finally, his voice low. "And you carried it alone." I looked down at my hands, thin against the blanket. I thought if I said it aloud it would break. The dream, the plan, silence was safer. He leaned forward. "But silence also costs, doesn't it?" My throat tightened. "It cost me Douglas. Or maybe I let him go long before Yolanda came." Mama snorted without opening her eyes. "Baby, that man let himself go. Don't you take credit for his foolishness." We laughed, a real laugh, the kind that cracked open my chest like fresh air. It startled me, how much I needed that. The door creaked, and Douglas stepped in quietly. He looked tired, worn down by Yolanda's demands and his own shame. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he murmured. "You didn't interrupt," Mama said dryly. "You just walked in." He gave her a look, but it had no bite. His eyes settled on me. "Viola, do you need anything? Water? Food?" It was such a simple question, and yet it pierced me. He hadn't asked me that in years. I shook my head. I have what I need, and it was true. For the first time, I did. Later that night, Mama finally dozed off, her soft snores filling the corner. Douglas had left, retreating to whatever shadows he belonged to now. It was just me and Malcolm, the room dim and quiet. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Can I ask you something personal?" I raised a brow. "After everything you already know, you think there's anything left that's not personal?" He smiled faintly. "Fair enough." He hesitated, then asked, "Why stocks? Why numbers? What drew you there?" I let the question sit before answering. "Because numbers don't lie," I said softly. "People do. People twist and turn, promise and betray. But numbers, they're steady. If you learn their rhythm, they'll never fail you." He studied me, something gentle in his gaze. "And yet, you still hoped people wouldn't fail you." The words cracked something in me. My eyes burned, tears slipping before I could stop them. "I just wanted to be seen.
Not as a wife, not as a caretaker. Just me. Malcolm didn't rush to comfort me. He didn't fill the silence. He let it breathe, heavy and real. And somehow, that was comfortable enough. The next morning, Mama woke with fire in her eyes. "I had a dream last night," she announced, sipping her tea. "Was it good or bad?" I asked. She smirked. "Both. I saw Yolanda tripping in them heels, falling flat on her face. That was the good part. The bad part was Douglas standing there trying to catch her. And both of them hitting the ground." Malcolm chuckled. "Dreams have a way of telling truths." Mama nodded. "They do. And the truth is this: Yolanda ain't your real enemy. Your real enemy is the doubt she planted. Don't let it grow." Her words sat with me all day. That night, Malcolm brought a chessboard. "You ever play?" he asked. I raised a brow. "Do I look like I don't?" He grinned. "Then prove it." We played for hours, pieces clicking softly against the board. Mama watched from the side, offering commentary that was half advice, half comedy. "Don't you move that bishop, Viola. That man is tricking you." "Malcolm, I raised a strategist. Don't think you're going to win easy." By the third game, I was laughing so hard tears streaked my cheeks. It wasn't about the game. It was about the space it created, a space where I wasn't Viola the betrayed, Viola the billionaire, Viola the headline. I was just me. I didn't realize he had come back until I saw him in the doorway watching us. His eyes lingered on me, then Malcolm, then the board. For a flicker of a moment, jealousy crossed his face, but he said nothing. He just turned and left. And I realized then, Douglas was beginning to understand what it meant to be on the outside. That night, after Mama drifted back to sleep and the chessboard was packed away, Malcolm sat quietly across from me. "You're stronger than you know," he said softly. I looked at him, really looked, not as my lawyer, not as my shield, but as a man who saw me. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe it. The days began to blur, each one rolling into the next. But for the first time since the fire, I felt a sense of calm. Not because the danger had passed. I knew Yolanda well enough to understand she wasn't done. But because something inside me was shifting. It was in the little things. The way Malcolm always arrived early, carrying not just legal updates but fresh coffee for Mama and a crossword tucked into his folder for me. The way Mama teased him relentlessly, calling him too proper for his own good, until even he broke into laughter. The way I found myself looking forward to our chess games at night, my fingers tracing the pieces long after the board was packed away. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. Douglas came less often now. When he did, he lingered by the door like a ghost, guilt carved into his face. Sometimes he tried to speak, small things, polite things. But the words died before they left his lips. I saw the way he looked at Malcolm, the envy, the regret, and I almost pitied him. Almost. Because it was dawning on him, slow and cruel. What he had thrown away could not be reclaimed. One evening, after Mama had gone home to rest, and the hospital halls grew quiet, I found myself speaking aloud without planning to. "I used to dream about running," I said softly, my voice carrying into the stillness. "Back when Douglas and I had nothing, I told myself that if I could just make enough, we'd escape, buy a house far away, start fresh." Malcolm didn't interrupt. He leaned forward, listening. But when the money finally came, I realized it couldn't buy escape, because the real prison wasn't outside. It was inside me. The fear that I wasn't enough, that I'd never be seen, that's why I hid the money. Not to spite him, not even to protect it, but because if it failed, at least no one would know. At least my shame would stay mine. My voice broke. And the cruel part is, I succeeded. I built everything. I became everything. And still, I wasn't seen. Silence filled the room, heavy and raw. Malcolm's voice was steady when it came. "I see you." I looked up, startled. His eyes didn't waver. "Not the money, not the strength. You. The woman who carried it all when no one cared to look. The woman who survived being unseen and still made herself into something unshakable. Viola, I see you. The words cracked me open. Tears slipped down my cheeks, hot and unashamed. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry in front of someone who wasn't Mama. Malcolm didn't reach across or rush to wipe them. He just sat with me, his presence steady as a wall, until the storm inside me eased. The next morning, Mama came bustling in, carrying a paper bag. "Y'all been eating hospital food too long? I brought real breakfast." The smell of fried chicken and biscuits filled the room, and even Malcolm smiled like a child. Mama winked at him. "Now don't let Viola beat you at chess tonight on a full stomach. You won't have any excuses left." I laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in weeks. For a moment, I felt like life wasn't just surviving Yolanda's schemes. It was living again. Across town, Yolanda sat in a smoky bar, her nails drumming against the table. "They think they've won," she told the man across from her, a heavy-set figure with connections she'd scraped together through desperation. "But I'm not done. I didn't come this far to be outplayed by silence." The man grunted. "What do you want?" She leaned in, her voice low and sharp. Something permanent, a message she can't ignore. If the fire didn't break her, then maybe the truth will. Her eyes gleamed. She already knew what card to play next. Douglas found her later that night, drunk and pacing her apartment. "Yolanda, what are you doing?" She turned on him, eyes blazing. "What do you think I'm doing? Fighting for us. Fighting for what we deserve." He shook his head. "This isn't us anymore. This is you." Her laugh was sharp, cruel. "Don't fool yourself, Douglas. Without me, you're nothing. Viola never needed you. I did." The words hit him like blows. For the first time, he saw himself clearly. Not a man in control, but a pawn in someone else's game, and the realization hollowed him out. That night, Malcolm and I played chess again. The board was between us, but the weight of unspoken words hung heavier than the pieces. "You're holding back," I teased, moving a rook. He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm letting you win." "Don't patronize me, counselor." He chuckled, but his eyes softened. "No, I would never." The warmth between us wasn't fire, not yet, but it was something steadier, something like a seed pressing through the soil. And for the first time, I let myself wonder what it might grow into. As the lights dimmed and silence filled the hospital once more, I lay back against the pillows, the faint echo of Malcolm's words still in my ears. "I see you." It was a fragile peace, but peace nonetheless. And though Yolanda's storm brewed in the distance for one brief, precious moment, I let myself rest in the calm, because I knew, when the next fire came, I would not face it alone. It began with whispers. Nurses who wouldn't meet my eyes. The television left on in the waiting area, volume lowered, but headlines flashing bold enough to scream. Even Malcolm's face, usually steady as stone, was tighter than usual when he walked into the room that morning. "Viola," he said softly, placing a folder on the table. "You need to see this." Mama set down her knitting, her lips pressed tight. "What now?" Malcolm hesitated. His eyes flicked to me, searching for permission. I nodded. He opened the folder. Inside was a tabloid spread, glossy, cruel. My face on one side, pale and bruised from the hospital bed. Yolanda on the other, draped in red, smiling at Douglas's side. The headline cut sharper than any blade. Douglas Green's wife unfit to manage fortune. Mistress Yolanda steps in as power partner. Beneath it, paragraphs of lies dressed as truth, that I had hidden my investments because of paranoia, that I was unstable since the accident, that Douglas had found stability and leadership in Yolanda. And at the bottom, bold as a dagger, court petition filed, power of attorney requested for Douglas Green. The air left my lungs. The door opened, and there he was, my husband. The man I once trusted with my heart, standing at the threshold like a stranger.
He couldn't meet my eyes. "Viola," he started, his voice low. "It's not what it looks like." Mama was on her feet in a flash. "Boy, if you don't shut your lying mouth—" "Mama," I whispered, my hand shaking. "Let him speak." Douglas swallowed hard. "Yolanda, she said this was the only way to protect the money. The press is already painting you as unstable. If we don't move fast—" "We?" My voice cracked like thunder. "There is no we, Douglas." He winced. I thought if I signed, I could at least keep it in the family, keep it safe." "By handing it to her?" His silence was answer enough, and then she walked in, bold as ever. In a suit this time instead of a dress, red still, but sharper, more dangerous. She carried herself like a queen entering her court. "Well," she purred, "looks like the cat's out of the bag." Mama's eyes narrowed. "Girl, if you don't—" Yolanda waved her off. "Save the sermon, old woman. The world has already chosen sides, and guess what? They chose me." I forced myself to meet her gaze. My voice was calm, though inside I burned. "You think headlines make you powerful?" "They do when the courts believe them," she shot back. "And they will. Douglas and I filed the papers this morning." My heart lurched. "You filed—" "Yes," she said, smiling. "By next month I'll be signing where you used to, while you sit here, waiting to be forgotten." For the first time, Malcolm lost his calm. He slammed the folder shut, his voice sharp. "This won't hold, not for a minute. You think power of attorney can be stolen with tabloids and perfume? You have no legal ground." Yolanda smirked. "Law is just paper. Public opinion is fire. And fire spreads faster." Her words twisted like smoke. For the first time since the fire, I felt my silence fail me. I wanted to scream, to claw, to make her choke on every lie. Instead, tears blurred my vision. Is this what it came to? I built an empire in shadows, carried it like a secret flame, only for it to be stolen in the open, paraded by the very woman who tried to burn me. For years I told myself silence was strength, but now it felt like chains. I wanted to give up. For the first time, I wanted to let it all go. Mama grabbed my hand, her grip iron. "Don't you dare quit now. Don't you dare let that Jezebel take what you bled for. You hear me, Viola?" I sobbed, shaking my head. "Mama, I don't know if I can—" "Yes, you can, because you already did. You carried it when nobody believed in you. You carried it when Douglas was chasing skirts and Yolanda was chasing shadows. Baby, you carried it alone. And now you got us. You ain't alone no more." Her words cracked through my despair like lightning. Douglas finally spoke, his voice weak. "Yolanda, maybe this is too far." She whipped toward him, eyes blazing. "Too far? After everything I gave you? After I pulled you out of her shadow? Don't you dare turn soft on me now." Type justice in the comments if you're ready to see people like Douglas and Yolanda get exactly what they deserve. And if you don't, well, maybe you're rooting for them. He shrank under her glare. And I saw it. The truth. Douglas wasn't Yolanda's partner. He was her pawn. The room was fire and smoke. Yolanda gloating, Douglas unraveling, Mama raging, Malcolm sharpening his fury. And me? I sat there, tears drying on my cheeks, a hollow ache in my chest. Because for the first time, I wondered if silence had finally betrayed me, and if Yolanda had already won. The silence after Yolanda's announcement was louder than any storm. Mama's hand was still wrapped around mine, steady and firm, but my body felt hollow, my mind screaming into a void. I couldn't look at Douglas, couldn't look at Yolanda. Even Malcolm's presence felt like a blur at the edges of my vision. I had carried fire and silence for so long, and now it seemed that silence had turned to ash. Yolanda leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her smile sharp as glass. "You see, Viola? You can't win. You can clutch those papers all you want, hide behind Malcolm's law books, cry into Mama's lap. But at the end of the day, nobody cares about your little empire. The world remembers winners, and I'm the one standing next to Douglas now." Her words slithered into the room, poisonous and smug. Mama's glare could have burned her alive, but Yolanda didn't flinch. She thrived on it. "You think money makes you powerful?" Yolanda continued. "Money doesn't buy loyalty, doesn't buy love. I do. That's why Douglas is here. That's why the papers are mine. That's why you'll fade." "Yolanda, stop," Douglas said, his voice shaky. She turned on him, laughter bitter. "What, feeling guilty now? Don't play the martyr, Douglas. You signed because you wanted to. Don't you dare act like I twisted your arm." He closed his eyes, shame pouring from every line of his face. "I thought I was protecting her." "You thought wrong," Mama snapped. His eyes flicked to me then, desperate. "Viola, I swear—" I raised a trembling hand. "Don't! Not another word!" Because nothing he said could undo the ink on those papers. I couldn't breathe. All the years I spent building, planning, saving, gone. All the nights I counted coins in secret, whispering prayers into silence. Wasted. All the sacrifices, the loneliness, the bruises I hid when Douglas stumbled home smelling of another woman. Meaningless. And for what? So that Yolanda could stand here in red, grinning like the devil, holding my life in her hands? The weight crushed me. I felt myself folding, breaking. For the first time since the fire, I wanted to give up. "Viola," Malcolm said softly, kneeling beside my bed. "Look at me." I couldn't. "You are not defeated," he pressed. "Not yet. Paper is not power. Yolanda has smoke, but you have fire. You always did." His words tried to reach me, but I was drowning too deep. Mama slammed her palm on the table, the sound cracking through the air like a whip. "Girl, don't you dare sit there and die while you're still breathing. Yolanda ain't stronger than you. Douglas ain't wiser than you. The only one who can take Viola down is Viola." Her words cut deep. "Baby, you didn't come this far, carrying $500 million in silence, just to let a Jezebel steal it with a headline. You hear me? You are more than this moment. Get up." Tears spilled down my cheeks. I wanted to believe her, but belief felt so far away. Yolanda smirked, reveling in my pain. "Listen to Mama all you want, but it won't change what's already done. The courts will side with us. The world will side with us. And when they do, Viola Green will just be a footnote. The forgotten wife." Her words hit harder than the fire ever did. "Stop it!" Douglas shouted suddenly, his voice breaking. He turned on Yolanda, eyes wide. "Enough! You've already taken everything from her. From me. What else do you want?" Yolanda laughed, cold and cruel. "Everything, Douglas. That's the point." And in that moment, I saw him for what he was. Not my husband, not even her lover. Just a man too weak to stand on his own. Yolanda leaned close, her perfume choking the air. "You thought silence made you strong, Viola, but silence makes you invisible, and invisible women don't win wars." She left then, her heels clicking down the hall, Douglas trailing behind her like a broken shadow. The room was quiet again, too quiet. Mama's hand was on mine. Malcolm sat close, his eyes steady. But I couldn't feel their strength. Not yet. All I felt was hollow, because Yolanda was right about one thing. I had made myself invisible, and now I had to decide whether I would stay that way. The hospital room was too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you hear your own heartbeat, your own breath, the slow tick of the clock mocking you for still being here. I lay there staring at the ceiling long after Yolanda's perfume had faded from the air. My body was weak, but my spirit felt weaker. The papers were signed, the headlines were loud, the world believed her story, and what did I have? Silence. For the first time in my life, silence felt like failure. Mama sat at the window, her knitting needles still in her lap. She hadn't moved for what felt like hours. Finally, she spoke. "Baby, you got to decide. Are you going to die standing, or are you going to live kneeling?" Her voice cracked through the quiet like thunder. I closed my eyes. "Mama, I'm tired. I carried it all. I built it all. And for what? For Yolanda to sweep in with her lipstick and lies? For Douglas to sign away everything I bled for?" Mama's chair scraped as she stood. She marched to my bedside and leaned down, her eyes sharp as glass. "For dignity," she said. "For freedom. For every little black girl who grows up thinking she got to hide to be safe. You didn't build this empire for Douglas, or Yolanda, or even for yourself. You built it for the ones who come after you. Don't you dare quit on them." Her words struck something raw. Malcolm slipped into the room quietly, holding a folder against his chest. His eyes softened when he saw me. Not pity, not judgment, just recognition. "You've seen the papers," he said softly. I nodded. "Then you know this isn't the end," he continued. "It's only the middle." I almost laughed. "Middle? Malcolm, Yolanda has the courts, the press, Douglas—" "Douglas is a shell," Malcolm interrupted. "The press is fickle. The courts demand proof. She has noise. But you have truth. And truth, when spoken, is fire." I turned my face away, tears burning my eyes. "What if I don't have the strength to speak it?" He didn't push. He didn't plead. He just placed the folder on the table beside me and said, "Then rest until you do. I'll hold the line until you're ready." And then he left me with the silence again. That night, Douglas came. Alone. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Hollow eyes, trembling hands, a man unraveling. He sat in the chair across from me, his voice low. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stared at him, unblinking. He rubbed his face. "Yolanda, she promised me we'd protect the money. She said it was the only way. I didn't realize. You didn't care to realize," I cut in. His eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong. About everything. About her. About you. I didn't see you, Viola, and now I can't escape what I've done." For a moment I almost pitied him, but pity wasn't the same as forgiveness. "You chose her," I whispered. His voice broke, and I regret it every day. I closed my eyes. "Regret doesn't rebuild what you've destroyed." He sobbed then, head in his hands, a broken man. But his tears couldn't wash away the ink on those papers. When he finally left, the silence that followed was heavier than before. I lay awake long into the night. The words circled in my head. Mama's challenge, Malcolm's faith, Douglas's regret, Yolanda's venom. Invisible women don't win wars. Maybe Yolanda was right. Maybe I had hidden too long. Maybe silence had protected me once. But now it was choking me. I thought of my first stock. That little slip of paper I bought with babysitting money. Nobody knew then. Nobody believed in me. But I believed. And wasn't that enough? It had to be. Because if I didn't rise now, Yolanda wouldn't just steal my money. She'd steal my story. And I refused to let that be my legacy. The clock ticked past midnight. I sat up in bed, my body trembling with weakness, but my spirit sharpening again. Mama stirred, her eyes opening. She smiled faintly, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "You made your choice, baby?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes," I whispered. No more silence. No more invisibility. If Yolanda wants fire, I'll give her fire. And for the first time since the accident, I felt alive. Morning came with sharp light cutting through the curtains. I didn't shrink from it this time. I sat upright in the hospital bed, my back straight, my heart steady. Mama noticed before anyone else. She set her knitting aside, her eyes narrowing in approval. "There she is," she said softly. "My child's back." I smiled faintly. "I was never gone, Mama. Just buried." By mid-morning, Malcolm entered, a folder tucked under his arm as usual. But this time, I didn't just let him lead. "Tell me what I need to know," I said firmly. He blinked, surprised, then nodded. "Yolanda filed aggressively. She's playing the media game, betting the courts will follow public opinion. But what she doesn't know—" He pulled out papers, laying them across the blanket. "Is that I've been digging deeper. These accounts, these debts, these scams, they don't just make her look bad. They make her dangerous." Mama leaned over, eyes sharp. "So what you're saying is, when Yolanda walks into that courtroom, she's walking on a floor full of cracks." "Exactly," Malcolm said. I studied the papers. the numbers and names weaving into a picture of desperation. "She's loud because she's scared," I murmured. Malcolm nodded. "And fear makes people sloppy." The door creaked open, and Douglas entered again. His eyes darted between us. Mama, Malcolm, me, sitting straighter than he'd seen in weeks. "You're planning something," he said, voice shaky. "No," I corrected. "I'm deciding something. There's a difference." He swallowed hard. "Viola, I want to help." Mama scoffed. "Help? Baby, the only thing you've been helping is Yolanda's lies." Douglas flinched. "I didn't know she'd push this far. I thought—" His voice trailed off, shame thick. I looked at him, my tone flat. "You thought you could have her and still keep me. You thought I'd stay silent forever." His eyes glistened. "I was wrong." "Yes," I said simply. "You were." And for once, I didn't let his regret pull me under. I realized then that Douglas was no longer the storm. He was just debris, tossed between Yolanda's hunger and my silence. And I wouldn't waste energy picking up what he chose to throw away. My fight wasn't with him anymore. It was with her. That evening, Mama sat at my side, her voice low but fierce. "You know what Yolanda's counting on? She's counting on you staying quiet, on you thinking dignity means silence. But dignity don't mean shrinking. It means standing." I nodded slowly. "Then I'll stand." Mama's smile was sharp and proud. "That's my girl." Across town, Yolanda stood before her mirror, adjusting her crimson suit jacket. She rehearsed her smile, tilting her chin just right. "This is my moment," she whispered to her reflection. "Viola can keep her silence. Douglas can keep his guilt. The world will keep me." But even as she spoke, her hands trembled. She poured another glass of wine to steady them, because deep down, Yolanda knew what Malcolm had discovered, and fear gnawed at her edges. That night, Malcolm stayed late again. We sat together in the dim light, papers spread between us, silence thick but not empty. "You're ready," he said finally. I met his gaze. "I have to be." He leaned closer, his voice low, steady. "Then let her bring fire. We'll answer with the truth." For a long moment, we just sat there, the air heavy with something unspoken. Not romance, not yet, but trust, deep and unshakable. As the clock struck midnight, I whispered to myself, "No more silence, no more invisibility. If she wants war, she'll have it." And for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim lying in a hospital bed. I felt like a woman sharpening her sword. The courthouse smelled of old wood and dust, a place where stories were twisted into evidence and lives reduced to files. I had always imagined that if I stood here, it would be as a spectator, quiet, anonymous, unseen. But today, I was the story. Mama walked beside me, her arms steady against mine. Malcolm led the way, briefcase in hand, his face set with quiet determination. The air outside buzzed with reporters, their cameras flashing, their questions sharp. "Mrs. Green, are you fit to manage your fortune? Viola, is it true Yolanda saved Douglas from your paranoia? Are you mentally stable enough to handle $500 million? Each word stabbed, but I kept my chin high. I would not bow to noise. Inside, Yolanda was already waiting. She wore another crimson suit, her lips painted to match. She sat beside Douglas, her hand on his arm, her smile wide for the cameras she knew were watching. But when her eyes met mine, I saw it, the flicker of fear she tried to bury. The judge's gavel fell, calling the room to order. Yolanda's lawyer rose first, his words slick. "Your Honor, we present evidence that Mrs. Viola Green has been mentally unstable since her recent accident. We argue she has hidden funds recklessly, built an empire in paranoia, and now is unfit to manage it. My client, Ms. Yolanda Price, alongside Mr. Douglas Green, seeks power of attorney to protect these assets." The courtroom murmured. Yolanda smirked, tilting her chin. Then Malcolm rose. "Your Honor," he began, his voice calm but cutting, What my learned colleague calls paranoia, I call vision. Mrs. Green did not recklessly hide funds. She strategically invested them, turning pennies into millions. Every cent accounted for, every step legal. The question before us is not whether she is unfit. The question is why those who betrayed her should be rewarded with power they did not earn. The murmurs turned sharper. Yolanda's smile tightened. The judge turned to Douglas. "Mr. Green, do you support this petition?" Douglas shifted in his seat. His hands trembled. His eyes flicked from Yolanda's glare to my steady gaze. His voice cracked. "I signed the papers, but—" Yolanda's nails dug into his arm. "But nothing, Douglas." He flinched, then blurted, "But I was wrong." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Yolanda's face went cold. "I signed out of fear," Douglas continued, his voice breaking. "Fear of losing her. Fear of being nothing. But Viola, she built everything. Alone. Strong. I see that now." Tears stung my eyes, but I kept my face calm. Mama whispered beside me. "About time." Yolanda shot to her feet, her voice sharp. "He's lying. He's just afraid of her now, afraid of her silence. You can't let this stand." The judge banged the gavel. "Miss Price, sit down." But Yolanda wasn't done. Her mask cracked, venom spilling out. "She isn't strong. She's nothing. Just a weak woman who hid in the shadows while I made Douglas feel alive." Her words echoed, ugly and raw. Malcolm rose slowly, placing a file on the judge's bench. "Your Honor, here are records of Ms. Price's debts, unpaid taxes, defaulted loans, predatory schemes. This is not the record of a woman fit to manage millions. This is the record of desperation." Gasps filled the room again. Reporters scribbled furiously. Yolanda froze, her fury faltering under the weight of truth. For years, I thought silence was my prison, but now I saw what it really was, my weapon. Because while Yolanda shouted, I built. While Douglas wandered, I planted. And while the world doubted, I endured. Silence had never betrayed me. It had prepared me. The judge called for recess. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, cameras flashing as Yolanda stormed out, dragging Douglas by the arm. I sat back, my heart steady. Mama squeezed my hand, her smile fierce. "This ain't over, baby," she murmured. "I know," I whispered back, because the final blow hadn't been struck yet. But Yolanda's mask was already crumbling, and I was ready to finish it. The courthouse steps were chaos. Reporters swarmed, their microphones thrust forward like spears, their voices colliding into a single roar. "Mrs. Green, how do you respond to Yolanda Price's accusations?" "Douglas, are you abandoning your mistress? Viola, will you keep control of the $500 million? I didn't flinch. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. I held my head high, Mama at one side, Malcolm at the other. But Yolanda? She stumbled through the crowd, her perfect smile gone, her face twisted with fury and fear. She hissed at the cameras, her words wild. "They're lying, all of them. Viola's nothing without me." The reporters smelled blood. They turned on her, their questions sharp as knives, and in her scramble to defend herself, Yolanda slipped. "She promised me power," she screamed, pointing at Douglas. "He said if I helped him, we'd rule together. I did this for him." Gasps erupted. Cameras flashed. Douglas froze, his shame laid bare before the world. The judge's face was stony as Yolanda's outburst was replayed in whispers. Malcolm handed over the last of the evidence, proof of Yolanda's fraudulent dealings, her unpaid debts, her manipulations. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "the choice is clear. Ms. Price sought power, not protection. Mr. Green signed out of weakness. But Mrs. Green, she built this empire with foresight, patience, and sacrifice. She is not only fit to manage it, she is the only one fit." The gavel struck. Petition denied. Power of attorney remains with Mrs. Viola Green. The courtroom erupted. Mama clasped my hand, her eyes wet but blazing. "That's my baby girl." Yolanda lunged toward me.
her voice breaking into shrieks. "You think you've won? This isn't over. I'll find another way. I'll burn it all before I let you keep it." Bailiffs caught her arms, dragging her back as she kicked and cursed. I rose slowly, meeting her gaze one last time. My voice was steady, my words sharp. "You already tried to burn me, Yolanda, and I'm still here. Fire doesn't scare me. It made me." Her scream echoed through the courtroom as they dragged her out. Her crimson suit wrinkled, her mask finally shattered. When the noise settled, Douglas remained seated, his shoulders slumped, his face pale. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Finally, he whispered, "I've lost everything." I studied him, not with anger, not even with pity, just clarity. "No," I said softly. "You threw it away, and Yolanda only helped you see it." He looked at me then, tears brimming. "Viola, I shook my head. "Don't. Regret is not redemption. You made your choice. Now you'll live with it." He dropped his gaze, broken in a way Yolanda never could have managed, and for the first time I felt free of him. It wasn't just the money I had reclaimed. It was my voice, my story, my dignity. For years, I thought silence was my shield, and it was, but it was never meant to be the end. Silence was the seed, and today it bloomed. Outside, when the crowd finally thinned, Mama turned to me, her voice low but rich. "You see, baby? This ain't just about Yolanda or Douglas. It's about every woman who's ever been told she's too quiet, too weak, too invisible. You showed them all. You showed me." I smiled through tears. "I only stood because you held me up, Mama." She squeezed my hand. "That's what we do. We hold each other. That's how we win." Malcolm didn't speak much as we left the courthouse, but when the car pulled up, he opened the door for me, his eyes steady on mine. "You fought well," he said simply. I smiled faintly. "No, I lived well. Fighting was just part of it." For a moment, the air between us softened, something unspoken rising. Not romance, not yet, but respect, trust. The promise of something more one day. That night back home, I walked through the quiet halls alone. The fire's scars still marked the walls. The echoes of betrayal still lingered in the air. But it was my house. My empire. My story. I stood before the mirror, touching the scar at my temple, my reflection steady. "Unafraid," I whispered to myself. "Unbroken. Unseen. No longer." And in that moment, I knew I had won. Not just against Yolanda, not just against Douglas, but against silence itself. The house was quiet again, not hollow like before, not heavy like when Douglas's shadow filled the walls. Quiet in a new way, like peace had finally remembered where I lived. It had been 6 months since the courthouse, 6 months since Yolanda was dragged out in crimson and Douglas disappeared into the folds of his shame. The world had moved on to other scandals, other headlines, but for me, the healing had only just begun. The fire-scorched wing of the house had been rebuilt, not identical, not restored to what it once was. I didn't want replicas of a past that had betrayed me. I wanted something new. The walls were painted lighter, the rooms opened wider, and for the first time in years, sunlight filled the hallways without shame. I walked those halls every morning, my slippers brushing against the polished floors. Mama would be in the kitchen humming, the smell of collard greens or cornbread already in the air before breakfast. And every so often, Malcolm's car would pull up outside, not always for business anymore, sometimes just to check in, sometimes just to sit. The first few times he came, we spoke only of documents, investments, and security measures. But slowly the conversations drifted into books we loved, memories of childhood, the ways grief shaped us differently, but left us both aching in similar places. He'd sit across from me in the living room, his tie loosened, his eyes softer than I'd ever noticed before. "You remind me of my grandmother," he said one evening.
She carried everything on her shoulders, too. Never asked for help, just endured. I smiled faintly. And what happened to her? He leaned back, thoughtful. She endured until she didn't have to. Until she finally allowed herself to live. The words lingered long after he left. Every so often, Douglas would call, always from a different number, always with the same slurred apologies. I didn't answer. Not anymore. His regret was his to carry, not mine to soothe. One night, Mama caught me staring at the phone when it rang, his name flashing across the screen. "You better not pick that up," she warned, her eyes sharp. "I wasn't going to," I said quietly. She tilted her head. "Then why are you still staring at it?" I let the phone buzz until it stopped, the silence after like closing a door for good. Douglas was my past. Malcolm, maybe, just maybe, was my future. It happened on a rainy evening. Malcolm had come over with a folder of updates on a case involving Yolanda's unpaid debts. She had vanished into obscurity. No money, no friends, no headlines. A fitting end. As he packed his papers away, the storm outside knocked the power out. The house plunged into darkness. Mama lit candles, shaking her head. Old house, always betraying us when it rains. She retreated to her room, leaving us in the flickering glow. Malcolm and I sat in the living room, the storm beating against the windows. For a while we said nothing. Then he spoke, his voice low. "Viola, do you ever regret it? Carrying it all alone?" I thought about it. The silence, the scars, the weight. Then I looked at him, the candlelight softening his face. "No," I said finally, "because carrying it alone taught me how to survive. But now I'm learning I don't have to anymore." He held my gaze. For the first time, I let myself feel the warmth rising between us. The storm raged outside, but inside, something quiet and tender began to bloom. Of course, Mama noticed before I admitted anything. One Saturday morning, she caught me setting 2 cups of coffee on the table before Malcolm even arrived. "Mm-hmm," she hummed, her eyes twinkling. "Somebody expecting company." "Don't start, Mama," I muttered, fighting a smile. "I'm just saying," she teased. "That man look at you like you're more than his client, like you're his compass." I rolled my eyes, but deep down, I knew she was right. It was late spring when Malcolm finally said it. We were walking through the garden, the air heavy with magnolia and earth. "I never expected this," he said quietly. "This?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "You, us, the way you've changed me. I came into your life as a lawyer, but somewhere along the way, I just wanted to stay." My heart clenched, not with fear but with recognition. "Malcolm," I said softly, "I don't know if I'm ready for love again. Not after Douglas, not after Yolanda." He stopped, turning to face me fully. "I'm not asking for all of you right now. Just the chance to be here, however you'll have me." I breathed in the scent of magnolias, the memory of fire flickering behind my eyes. Then I reached for his hand. "Then stay," I whispered. And he did. Our love didn't explode like Yolanda's schemes or Douglas's betrayals. It unfolded slowly, gently, like dawn after a long night. Malcolm didn't smother me. He didn't demand I shrink to fit him. He simply stood beside me, steady, patient, unshaken. When nightmares came, he held my hand until sleep returned. When Mama teased, he laughed right along with her. When I doubted myself, he reminded me of the empire I had built in silence, and the voice I had found in fire. This love wasn't survival. It was living. If you had told me years ago that I'd fall in love again, I would have laughed. Bitter, tired, unbelieving. But now, as I sit on the porch with Malcolm's arm around me, Mama humming in the kitchen, and the evening sky turning gold, I know the truth. The fire didn't destroy me. It refined me. Douglas was my past. Yolanda was my trial. But Malcolm is my proof that love can still come after ruin. And this time, it is love on my terms. A love that doesn't silence me. A love that finally lets me be seen. And listen, if you've stayed with me all the way through this tale, through every twist, every betrayal, every jaw-dropping reveal, don't walk away without hitting that subscribe button. Why? Because the stories we share here aren't just entertainment. They're lessons. They're warnings. They're reminders that power can be taken, that love can be lost, and that silence can either bury you or build you. And if you're one of the people who sat here, holding your breath until the very last word, if you stayed with me through fire, through betrayal, through every shattering secret, then you're ready for what this silly husband of mine did to me just before I opened up to him about my inheritance. The video is on the screen now. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now to watch that.